Welcome everybody to the February 2021 Plants Lovers Tour of the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. We are in an older part of the Arboretum, part that we call the Southall Garden. It gets its name from this memorial plaque here to a Russell M. Southall, a former NC State teacher and scholar and plantsman, botanist and friend. One of the most significant parts of the Southall Garden area is the Boxwood Collection, but I want to come back to that in a few minutes and highlight some other plants in this area. I'm afraid we're in a very noisy location between today's wind, and we're very close to the public road. And the power company has like a gazillion vehicles out on the road working on various things, I think probably all related to the highway expansion 2 blocks from here. But at the time that JC came in 1976, there was a 2-story brick building here, the Southall building. The first floor was classrooms, and the upper floor had an apartment, and at times it was rented out either to the farm manager or other people. The house set between these 2 huge willow oaks, Quercus fellows. Probably anyone living in the Southeast knows willow oaks because it's one of the most commonly planted street trees. It's rather fast growing for an oak. These are not exceptionally ancient trees. They just get really big really fast, but they also tend to not live as long as other native oaks.
So live fast, die young.
Yeah, and of course, they get their name willow oak because of the long, narrow leaves that are like a willow, like the leaves of a willow. Quite a bit of mistletoe up in this one here, and then to our left are a couple old loblolly pines. I'm going to call them loblolly pines. I'm not an expert on our native pines. Continue over this way. Shortly before JC's death, he planted out, would hundreds be reasonable?
I don't know about hundreds, but a lot. Oh, probably close to 100 though.
Yeah, 100 seedling hybrid mahonias from Yucca-Do Nursery in Texas. And my understanding is they were just open pollinated seedlings, meaning that bees and other pollinators made the crosses, that a person wasn't involved in the crosses. And they're very variable. This one has a fairly narrow leaflet, much like probably the low narrow pollinator. But there's a real curious one on the other side.
There's a lot of variation in the size of the plant. Some of these in here are actually quite compact. They've never really been pruned. We have some actually over in the mixed border as well that are super compact. But yeah, this is a really funky looking one.
Yeah, this one is probably the most distinct one when it comes to the actual type of inflorescence. They look sort of like a bunch of fingers dangling down, but maybe not a thing of great beauty, but I think it's really interesting. I wouldn't mind looking at that in my garden.
I think it's cool, and it is super compact.
Yeah, the plant's just barely top 6 feet, or maybe not quite 6 feet. These being hybrids, I don't know that they set much fruit.
which is not a bad thing,
No, that's not
especially
bad for you at
since
all.
Mahonias do like to self-sow.
Tim will make sure you get the chance to see the trunk of this tree. It's one of the rosewoods. Rosewoods are in the genus Dahlbergia. You look at that generic name Dahlbergia, and what I see is a good German family name, Dahlberg. Hupiana from Hubei province in China, but it's actually very, very widely dispersed in China. I saw Yunnan, Sichuan, Hubei, many provinces in China. The genus Dahlbergia is very widespread around the world. It seems like it occurs in most subtropical to tropical parts of the world. And the common name rosewood comes from the fact that the wood is very fragrant and it's very sweet fragrance. I didn't find a reference that specifically said that it smelled like roses, but it is sweetly scented. But that's not why the wood is harvested. The wood is usually very highly colored and usually with very pronounced contrast between the veining in the wood and stuff. So beautiful, beautiful wood that is often used for decorative purposes rather than strictly building material. Now, not all species of rosewood are used that way, but quite a few of them are. And a few species are over harvested in the wild. So, that's a problem too, but many are for wood production. But just a gorgeous trunk. Dahlbergias in the legume family with beans and peas. And I don't know if you'd see it looking up at the tree, but you can see plant seed pods or fruit up on the limbs of the tree. Tim's picking up a few from the ground. And a curious thing about this plant, it is one of the last trees in the arboretum to leaf out.
It'll be mid-May, mid to late May sometimes before it leaves out.
But I just think the trunk itself is absolutely gorgeous. Behind it is the Momi fir, which is the firs are Abies, and that's Abies firma. I don't know for sure, but firma I suspect is Latin cousin of the word fern. The needles are very stiff, and most firs are more boreal plants from colder climates and don't thrive in the southeast. But the Momi fir is from central and southern Japan, and southern Japan's pretty warm, and it's actually one of the most heat tolerant of the firs, enough so that it's often used as an understock for other species of fir. Here at NC State, there's a lot of research into Christmas tree conifers, and they will plant a field to Prunus, not Prunus, I'm confusing Prunus mume and the Momi fir, I'm sorry. They will plant a field to the Momi fir, Abies firma, and use it as an understock for balsam fir, because when Phytophthora and other soil fungus infest the soil, you can't replant to Fraser fir or balsam fir, but Abies firma is resistant to them, so they actually use it as an understock for maybe the Christmas tree you had this past December. Pretty amazing that a Christmas tree could be worthwhile enough to actually graft and not just grow from seeds. Not about that beautiful tree.
I can't think of its name at this moment.
Yeah.
This is Sunshine.
Yeah. This is the fairly new privet or ligustrum cultivar Sunshine. Bright yellow foliage, more so in the summer than in the winter time. What's notable about this plant is you can't find a single fruit on it, which makes it a plant you can tolerate in your garden, because various privets are some of our worst invasive exotic plants. You'll often see woodlands where the whole shrub layer in an established woodland is nothing but Asian species of privet, but Sunshine doesn't flower or fruit. So it's a safe one to plant. And even though this plant's gotten fairly large, you can maintain it at any size you want. Privet is extremely tolerant of shearing, so it's great for trimmed hedges or topiaries.
It's actually one, this was found by our local nurseryman, Pat McCracken. And until 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't see it being planted around here, but now they're planting it all over.
I might point out this plant.
Yep.
This is pineapple guava. This is something you could plant for the edible fruit. The fruit is still green when it's ripe, but when it's ripe, it falls on the ground. And a couple of our student workers this past fall, I introduced them to the fruit and they liked it so. They went out and cleaned up every fruit from underneath the plant and took it home. The fruit, it has a soft, about the texture of a pear, but a lovely sort of, well, pineapple-like texture, flavor. And the pineapple guava is Acca, A-C-C-A. It used to be in the genus, and I don't know how to pronounce
Feijoa?
it. Yes,
Something like that.
Feijoa. And this is not the common guava you find in the grocery store, or at least in some grocery stores. That's a closely related genus Psidium, starting with a PS. And they're closely related. They're both in the myrtle family along with eucalyptus. But delicious fruit, but I think also a handsome evergreen plant. And the trunk, this is a fairly small plant, but the trunk gets pretty with nice sort of golden peely bark.
I like the flowers on it.
Oh, I forgot about the flowers. Tell me about the flowers.
Yeah, I don't like the fruit so much. I've had it. To me, it's grainy kind of, but the flowers, I don't know if they're sepals or if they're petals actually, or bracts or what, but there's typically 4 of them that surround the stamens. The stamens are a little bit, they're bright pink and red, and the insides of those bracts or petals are pink. The outsides tend to be white. They soften and they taste like bubble gum to me. And they'd be good. They're good in a salad is what I would recommend. It's a little bit sweet. It's just a really cool thing. You can eat them. You can eat the whole flower, but you can also just take whatever those petals or sepals off and eat those, and you can leave the stamens, and you're not really going to affect the fruit set on it. So,
yeah, and I'm not arguing with Tim. If they taste like bubble gum to him, that's fine. I love eating the flowers on the pineapple guava. The taste reminds me of spiced gumdrops.
okay.
I don't know if spiced gumdrops are even a candy that's made anymore, but that sort of clove taste of spice.
I could see a little bit. It might be the big red that I'm getting then.
Okay.
Instead of bubble gum.
We will talk about the Boxwood family, the Boxaceae, and several genera in that family, including Boxes, the Boxwoods. But don't run screaming from your computer screen, because we will not spend the remainder of our time on Boxwood, but we'll touch on other things as well. The name Buxus is an ancient Latin name for the plant because the ancient Latins would have known boxwood. It's a fairly small genus, about 70 species, it's interestingly very widespread. The largest number of species are subtropical to tropical. And a real curious thing about the distribution, of those 70 species, 30 of them occur in Cuba. I suspect that many of the ones that grow in Cuba wouldn't survive our original. But Buxus sempervirens is native to, widespread to Europe. And then a lot of the ones we grow that are winter hardy in zone 7 are of Asian origin. So Buxus sempervirens meaning evergreen, is the common box. And we'll see a number of selections, but many others. But there are also some interspecific hybrids. And we're standing right by one that's very common in the nursery trade, but it's one called Barter Valley. Actually, it is a sempervirens. I thought this was a hybrid, but it's such a beautiful dark green year round.
It doesn't, I mean, it does get, we have leaf miners in our boxwood because we have so many of them, but this one doesn't show a lot of the damage from it, even though it does get them. I'm really picky about my boxwoods because we have so many here. There's only a few I like, and this is one of the ones I like. And like Doug says, it's a really dark color. It's a black green. It's so, I mean, but it has a blue cast to it too sometimes.
And
here, oh yeah, here's what I don't like. I don't know if we can see it on here or not. We'll hope.
Tim's absolutely right. Leaf miner is a serious problem in some boxwoods. The leaf miner is an insect that is tiny enough that it can live between the top and the bottom of that leaf blade. Talk about tight quarters. And you might notice, I hope, that this leaf is sort of two-tone. Well, the paler green is where the leaf miner has lived and probably eaten a lot of that good stuff between the outer and lower skin of that leaf. But when you go through a collection of boxwood, you'll notice that some varieties get leaf miner very heavily and, pretty much all the time, and other selections get little to none. When I look at Barter Valley, I'm hard pressed to notice much.
I can find some on the undersides, but the top surfaces look reasonably clean on this one. You can see some there at my thumb.
Yeah. There are chemical treatments you could probably use for leaf miner, but why not just make the select plants that don't get it? There's probably hundreds and hundreds of selections of Buxus sempervirens, but you remember the English and people from the European continent grew up with these plants for, since the beginning of time. And so they have made many selections. But I love this one with its broad, glossy leaves. This is Buxus sempervirens rotundifolia, the one with the round leaves. Just a nice gloss and foliage nice and clean.
You can see the shape of the plant there. That's more or less unpruned. So
there are so many dwarves. Buxus microphylla is an Asian species. There's also Buxus sinica, which is very similar. I don't know the difference. But this is, I should point out this, it's not uncommon for some of these dwarves to throw up some normal size growths like this, and those should be cut away because they will otherwise outgrow the dwarf form. Yeah, Tim's insisting that I do it right now, and
who knows when we'll get back to it. We'll walk by it and not have our pruners with us.
Yeah. So when I see that happen, I wonder if the dwarf one originally arose as a sport on the full-size one, and so it's just reverting back to its original type. This is a nice concept, another selection of microphylla.
Oh, yeah.
Japonica. Really nice.
And you can see it in contrast to the rotundifolia on Doug's side, and then the opposite side is the Varder Valley. So it's a lighter green as well. But it's actually clean the way it looks.
Have a lot of grape.
Oh no, that's a sequoia.
Yeah.
Dendron. No, it's
Yeah.
sequoia. Yeah.
Yeah. Did I mention it?
It's up to you. It's been better over the years, but it's getting shaded now. Here's the trunk on that oak. You can see it with Doug next to it. Yeah. They don't stay small. There's a bunch of camellias in here that a lot of them are more or less the wild type, just a single red, which
Yeah.
I find that very attractive. They start flowering typically in December for us, and these keep on going for a long time. So that's what I like about them. They're not as showy as some of the other ones, but they're very well worth growing as far as I'm concerned, just as nothing else, a background plant or to give you a little bit of, you know, that it's a really clean green to work with. So
Yeah, the foliage is just gorgeous.
we have not done anything to
shapely
these.
and glossy and clean, and you know, the contrast between red and green is perfect. These flowers are a little off colored by the freezing weather we've had. You know, they look more sort of liver red rather than fire engine red. But
I'm not sure. I'm just following you at this moment.
well,
You can show them.
these might seem like gigantic boxwoods to you, but Boxwood sempervirens can get a whole lot taller than this. You know, sometimes up to 30 feet tall or even taller. Now you might be asking, well, what about American box and English box? Well, I've never liked the term American box because none of them are native to North America. And you know, that the term American and English boxwood are applied to two selections of Boxwood sempervirens. Generally, the full-size growing ones in this country are called American box, and an English box is a particular cultivar of Boxwood sempervirens, which I can point out in a moment, which is Boxwood sempervirens fruticosa, which is a lovely, that's that lovely mid-green one that makes the big billowy clouds. You know, such a classic in colonial gardens like Williamsburg.
The Croton.
Yeah, we can talk about
Is it in flower yet? I can't tell. I don't have my glasses on. It's in bud. It's not in flower. Or pretty late winter, early spring. It's starting to bud though.
Yeah, if you can bear with us jumping around a little bit, we'll talk about two fairly rare native shrubs native to the Southeast. This is the Alabama Croton, Croton alabamensis. Again, that ensis ending meaning from. So this is from a very small native range in Alabama, and I think they also found it in Georgia, but I might be thinking about the next shrub. It is in the scientific genus Croton, which is a little bit confusing if you're familiar with the tropical shrubs that are grown for their colorful foliage that have Croton as their common name, but are in the genus Codium. But they are both in the Euphorbia family, which is sort of surprising too. But the Alabama Croton is semi-evergreen. It loses about half of its foliage. Tim's showing you the underside of the leaf. It's very silvery. I think one of the really fun aspects of this, that in the fall, when it's losing its foliage, they turn
Orange.
soda pop orange. You know,
That's
this is
nothing
just
yet.
a little suggestion of that, but it's really one of the few plants that colors up such a pure orange in the fall. They're not, Tim, would you say they were showy in bloom?
No, my goodness, no. You have to
Yeah.
look for them. All the
Yeah.
croton species are like pretty nondescript in flowering.
Yeah.
But,
And then
next door we have Nuvusia alabamensis, right?
yeah. Nevusia, after somebody with a French family name of Nevus or some version of that, with the lovely common name of Alabama snowwreath. It's in the rose family, as is spirea, and the plant is very much like a spirea, though I think they lack any petals, so it's just these little clusters of creamy white stain.
And it flowers early. It probably in March we'll have flowers on this.
Yeah, it almost
Maybe
looks
even
like-
late February some
it
years.
looks like these buds are swelling already.
Yeah, and I think it's federally endangered if I remember right.
It could be. I think its native range is very limited.
And it's hard to grow for us here. I've pulled out half of this before.
Yeah, Tim, I'm sure you realize it's being sarcastic. There are a lot of plants that are very rare in the wild that are perfectly easy plants in the garden. And certainly the Alabama snowwreath spreads underground. You can see new stems popping up over here.
I've taken that all out a couple years ago.
Yeah, so, you know, plant that's very worthwhile if you have a large garden or a bank to cover.
Yeah,
But we'll jump back to
Boxwoods.
Boxwoods. Do you mind if we take a few steps back here?
Sure. You do this while there's no traffic.
Yeah. This is still the common Boxes sempervirens, but there's quite a few selections that have a very narrow conical to columnar growth habit. So you can get that shape in your garden without having to go out and shear it every other week because it assumes this shape on its own. This is the cultivar named Northland. Beautiful dark foliage and nice narrowly conical growth.
And this is actually reasonably shaded during the summer right here, and it's pretty tight. So it's not, you can't grow an upright juniper or anything in the shade and have it survive, but you can have this. Or this would work like in a container on your porch that's not in the sun.
And though I always preface the following statement by saying I hate to say that deer don't eat it, but deer, I've never known deer to eat boxwood. Oh, one thing I meant to grab a stem of Japanese honeysuckle, not honeysuckle, Japanese holly.
Someone mentioned that a few minutes ago, actually, on here.
Japanese holly and boxwood foliage looks very, very similar. Boxwood foliage is always in pairs or opposite. Well, I see a few exceptions, but boxwood is characterized by leaves in pairs, whereas the hollies have alternate. They're not in pairs. They're one on one side of the stem, and then you go up a little further. So that's a way to tell the two apart.
We used to have some right here near the monument for Southall. Over to one of my favorites.
Oh, really?
I like this one.
This is a very different boxwood. These are fairly large compared to sempervirens. Go ahead, Tim.
They're super plasticky and thick.
It's
I don't. So.
It's Buxus wallickiana, again a family name Wallick, WALLIC, and Yeah,
There isn't a spot of leaf miner on this. I think they're so thick and plasticky that
yeah,
leaf can't get.
yeah. It's quite the plant that you want to just handle to feel the texture of the foliage.
And its neighbor looks terrible with leaf miner and other issues. And it does, like I said, there's not a speck of leaf miner on that.
We'll look at the Harlan.
Yeah, over there, they're better. They're easier over there. Yeah.
This might be my favorite boxwood in the collection. You know, maybe my top 10. But this is a common box, Boxus sempervirens, collected from a wild source. And I'm going to stand right next to it. It's, you know, mid-thigh height. You know, that's 3 feet, so it's about 30 inches tall. I meant to see, do you remember? It has a 2002 accession number.
It was planted here probably, I'm going to guess, probably in 2008 or 9. And it was maybe a foot or so tall, maybe a foot and a half. Yeah, this was planted actually outside of our staff building for several years.
And so this is its natural growth habit. Nobody is guiding its growth habit. And it's a lovely dark green. I think it's really pretty how these buds that are going to produce the next year's new growth.
They're imbricate. They're like little shingles.
Yeah, are really almost like an ornament on the green foliage. And it's one the J.C. Ralston Arboretum named last year, Emerald Gumdrop.
And again, it's one I think I took notice of this one, and I said we need to do something with it.
Yeah.
Because I propagated the Boxwood Society was supposed to be here last year, and of course nothing happened because, well, they couldn't be here because of COVID. But there isn't a speck of leaf miner on this either, as I keep on going back to that. And there's two similar size but totally different leaf forms of other sempervirens. These have a round leaf, and they have the stippling on the foliage. Well, I don't know what causes it, but it's not the leaf miner. But this doesn't have that. It's just a crisp green, gorgeous little thing.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's very overcast today. The sun fulfilled its 5-minute obligation and has now retreated behind the clouds, but it just glows on a day like today. That's a lovely rich green and enough gloss to the foliage.
Okay, the stipplings from mites is what Mark is saying. Okay, and yeah, this doesn't have any of the mites. So it's those leaf miners and the mites that get me.
Okay. There are a number of variegated selections of various boxwoods. This again is common Boxus sempervirens. This is Argentio variegata. Argentis meaning silver, more sort of cream to my eye. There are a number of other variegated ones we have in the Arboretum, but aren't in this vicinity, so you'll have to visit them some other day, including a fairly new one called Angel's Gift from a nursery here in North Carolina, Angel Nursery, that has a very roundish leaf with a wide green margin. That's a really lovely thing. We saw the narrowly chronicled boxwood a few minutes ago, Northland. These are some older plants of various columnar ones, and they're not super tight, but that's probably partly because they're in full shade here. But still, without any shearing, you see they're only maybe not much more than 3 feet wide without any training. There's D. Runk. There's
Probably pyramidalis, I'm
yeah,
guessing.
Pyramidalis. So, you know, if you need a screening hedge, but you don't want one that you have to go out and prune every few minutes. These narrow growing ones are a good asset. We should turn around and look at the trunk on the screen.
Yes.
Completely off the topic of boxwood. This is Chinese Zelkova sinica. Its bark's been exfoliating nicely this winter, and the color is just drop dead gorgeous. Really stands out from a distance.
And it's actually, I noticed it last week when it was wet in the rain. It's even better on a rainy day of all things. So.
Excuse me, what is that again?
That's Zelkova sinica. It's a Chinese Zelkova.
You leave it on the screen a minute. See,
Chris just put it there, but I'll show you the label as well. In case anyone doesn't have their chat open, I am typing all the botanical names and common names in the chat as they are mentioned. Sometimes it takes me a little while to verify the spelling, though.
okay, thank you.
It sounds like Bernadette.
No.
This is a different species of boxwood. This is Buxus harlandii. Those scary Latin names are often just people's names, and this is named for somebody with the family name of Harland. Glossy, bright, mid-green color, very clean foliage, lovely texture.
Elongated leaves,
Yeah.
if you haven't noticed. Different texture to look at as a result. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't have the leaf miner or the mites. That's another Varder Valley. I like this one here, actually, this species. I don't know a whole lot about it. I think it's Buxus sinica. So the Chinese boxwood, I'm assuming. But this is just the wild type from what I know. It has a little bit of a bronze winter tone to it, but the leaves are great big on it. In the sun, it really gets some bronzing, but it's a green with a bronze cast. It's a little bit different. It's more open. It's not a dense boxwood, and it's just a different texture.
The bronze underside reminds me of some of the selections of Southern Magnolia that have that brown indumentum.
What age are the larger specimens? I'm not sure offhand on some of these. A lot of these, the big ones go back a ways.
Do they predate JC?
No, I don't think so.
All right,
no.
well then they might be in the neighborhood of 45 years old or so.
That might be some of the unnamed survivals. Chris, are you able to check that?
Because I know some of these boxwoods just have the XX designation for plants that were planted before records were being kept.
So some of them I see from the 90s too. So maybe 25 to 35 would be just a rough guess on some of the older ones in here. I don't know when the whole collection went in, but
I can't read that. Can you read that?
It's 97.
Okay.
So
a couple real small growing ones. This Morris dwarf is quite common. My goodness. I wish you could be here to touch it. It is so stiff. It is so dense. It's like it's something other than made of wood and leaf. It's so dense. That's Microphylla, Morris dwarf. Justin Brower's is very fine textured with tiny little leaf. Selection of Buxus sinica. And I mentioned, English boxwood, so-called dwarf English boxwood is this one, Buxus sempervirens fruticosa. It's sort of the boxwood that most people aspire to grow, though there's plenty of others that are perhaps even better. There's Bodenerii here.
Oh, yeah. Wow, they're getting overtaken now.
Yeah.
I remember when they were third that size.
These are another species. This is Buxus Bodenerii, again, named for a person, Bodenier. I put that probably French name. The leaves are elongated, much like Harlandii, but the plant is very dense growth.
It's a different shape. It's like an upside down raindrop, I guess, maybe?
Yeah, sort of oval shape.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Harlandii seem to be much wider and spreading.
Yeah, Harlandii has a nice loose aspect to the plant. There are other boxwoods of note in the other parts of the Arboretum that we won't see today. One that I really love is Buxus henriana, very beautiful growth habit.
Okay, yeah.
Down in the southwest, just beautiful, graceful growth habit and a nice clean dark green.
And those were grown from seed.
Okay. The others we might.
I don't know. Are we able to venture over that direction?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you were saying about some other family members
Oh, yeah,
in Boxwood,
yeah,
the Boxwood family.
Okay.
And there's also another plant over there. There's Pachysandra, yeah. There's we have procumbens over there.
Oh. Kingsville is a fairly common dwarf boxwood, very dwarf, but again, you know,
They like to throw reversions.
Yeah. It's otherwise extremely tight.
What's that one again, please?
Kingswood,
Kingsville.
or Kingsville, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Kingsville.
I once had 375, I think there were 2-gallon pots of this boxwood in my car when a nursery in Charlotte was going out of business, and somebody I was gardening for bought every last one of them. Okay. Now, the boxwood family, not the genus, but the family has, I believe, 6 genera in it, genera being the plural of genus. And some of them were genera I don't know anything about, but one that is well represented in gardens is Sarcococa. Sarcococa, common name is sweet box. Again, box referring to their boxwood relatives, and sweet to the fact that the flowers are powerfully fragrant. You can see those are fully open flowers. Plants in the boxwood family generally lack petals. Some also lack sepals. So the flowers consist just solely of the stamens or the pistil. And I think the flowers are generally one sex or the other. So the flowers are very, very reduced. This is Sarcococa hookeriana, named for somebody named Hooker, probably the person from the Royal Horticulture Society in England. And this is a selection called Western Hills. Western Hills was this incredibly wonderful nursery out in, I guess, the San Francisco area. Yeah, that sounds right. I don't know if that nursery still exists, but there's a small number of species that are found in gardens. A lot of them are fairly similar one to the other, but some vary in the color of the fruit. Some have black fruit, some have red fruit.
Some are more compact. There's some that only get 6 or 8 inches tall, maybe 10.
Yeah, there's Sarcococa hookeriana variety. What are the real low one?
It might be hookeriana.
it might be, but
That is Hookerina, variety Hookerina. I'm not sure. I can't think of the cultivar, so.
yeah. Most of the sarcococcus we grow are in this 3 to 4 foot range, but there is that little low growing one that is a wonderful
Or is it
small
Hugh
scale.
Mills?
It might be Hugh Mills. Chris could tell us. That's a wonderful little small scale ground cover. You know, this foliage on a plant is just about 6 inches tall. Anything else?
The Pachysandra,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
going to one of our native Bucks ACE.
There is a genus in the boxwood family that is herbaceous, that is not a tree or a shrub, and that is Pachysandra. And I think there is only one species of Pachysandra native to North America, and it is this species, Pachysandra procumbens. The Pachysandra that's better known in gardens, especially points north of here, is the Japanese, one of the Japanese species, Pachysandra. What is it?
Terminalis.
Terminalis. Thank you. It's been years since I had to think about Pachysandra terminalis. I spent a number of summers sticking cuttings of Japanese Pachysandra for sale. But Pachysandra procumbens, so this planting might give you the impression that it is a spreader. It does not spread, it just makes a wide clump. It doesn't spread underground. This was a plant that had been in the lath house for a number of years. And the lath house is not meant to be the permanent home for most of the plants that get planted there. So when we took it out of the lath house, we divided it into many pieces. Yeah, and like boxwood and sarcococca, the flowers aren't all that showy. They're mostly little stamens.
Okay.
Did you see that trillium in full leaf?
Yeah, and it's been like that for weeks. I've been trying to see if it's
Okay.
going to flower. But yeah, this is just the buds here. It's when this is in flower, it's probably 3 to 4 inches tall and white. I think they're quite pretty when they're flowering. It's a little more noticeable than some of the other species and the boxwoods.
What is the trillium?
This is a florid selection from Florida, and I can't remember what it is offhand.
Is it the same as what's down below?
Yeah, it's the same as over here. Let me see here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, some of our native trilliums start into growth very early. It's probably an effort to make use of the sunlight that's available on the woodland floor before the trees leaf out. They also, in some situations, might be making use of the moisture that's available in the wintertime that they have less access to in the summer. But these leaves almost have like an oil sheen to them.
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Yeah, and what species?
I don't remember, and I can't
Okay.
find the label right now.
Okay,
I believe they're Trillium ludovicianum.
Yeah,
Trillium.
and isn't this like from the further south range in Florida, Mark?
You know, I don't know its range right off. Ludovicianum implies, isn't that Louisiana?
yeah.
It
Louisiana.
seemed like this was like a
Star.
disjunct one or something. I can't remember now, but I have to look in face or in FileMaker. Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on open to see when they open, but they haven't opened yet.
So, well, not too bad.
Sure.
All right, this is a plant that is somewhat controversial because it can seed around a fair amount. This is Arum italicum, the Italian arum, and it's quite variable in the garden. This is quite a distinct one.
Yeah.
If Tony Avent is watching this presentation, he might be wanting to get us started this and put a name on it, but that is not a typically colored leaf. They are in the aroid, in the arum family, and they make a stalk of red fruit, very similar to the stalk of fruit that Jack in the Pulpits make. So to prevent them from spreading around, just cut that fruit off before this fruit are dispersed.
And here's another totally different one, pattern wise. They've naturalized in the garden.
You know, Picea orientalis, the Caucasian spruce, is a really beautiful spruce. Some of them to my eye are rather stiff and awkward looking, but Picea orientalis always has these beautiful sort of sweeping down and arching back up limbs. And the foliage is a lovely bright green, very delicate in texture.
This one actually can be yellow if it's in full sun in a climate that it likes. For us here, it often is. It doesn't like the heat and sun. But if you go to the Pacific Northwest, these are gorgeous.
Well, this is the cultivar Skyland.
Yeah.
And I think Skyland is one of those conifers that is dark green most of the year, and then the new growth is bright yellow, which is really a beautiful contrast between the bright yellow and the dark green of the mature foliage. I think there are selections of Picea orientalis that try to be yellow year round. I'm not positive about that. But it's a spruce that's happy in this climate.
Sure, it's something different. That's really gorgeous right now.
Yeah, this is Viburnum tinus. The English call it Laurus tinus. Maybe because Laurus is the culinary bay, and this leaf is a lot like a bay leaf, so Laurus tinus might mean, I'm just guessing. But the buds are very prominent all winter, and this selection has exceptionally well-colored buds. They're often a lot less pink than this. And the train is going by. This cultivar is Lisa Rosa, but it has a trademark name, Shades of Pink. You can see it is blooming, starting to bloom. You see some open flowers, but a nice mid-sized shrub for months and months of winter interest. A slightly stinky viburnum.
That's what I was gonna
Not
say.
horrible. Yeah.
Or another Sarcococa.
Yeah, no, it's a crocus.
Let's see this one. Oh, this is a
Yeah, a different species of sweet box, Sarcococa. This is Sarcococa ruscifolia, which meaning foliage like ruscus, the butcher's broom. This one's not yet in bloom, but you can see it's loaded with flower buds. A broader leaf plant, and you know it's well, it's a good 4 feet tall, slightly more, maybe almost 4.5 feet tall. It's a young plant, so certainly might get taller. Ruscus is no, it's a super easy plant to grow. It's very tolerant to dry shade. I suspect it wouldn't be happy in the soggy spot, but other than that, it's a very forgiving plant.
Pardon? Yep.
The epimediums, most people know them as epimediums. They do have several common names like barren wort, not a very pretty name. A few species are European, huge numbers of species in Asia. This is Epimedium Wusha Ents. Yeah, Wusha Ents from Wushan, China. Handsome foliage plant. Tim, why don't you describe the flowers? You know it better than I do.
This is actually a large flowered species. They're white and yellow on this one. They kind of, I don't know, maybe like a columbine. I don't know, except for the spurs kind of reflect down over the front. They're in the barberry family. This is one of my favorite species that we have here at the garden. We don't have a whole lot, but this is probably the favorite one we have, just because of the size of the flower, and it's a great plant. Some of them, the foliage doesn't hold up as well as others, but this one does.
Yes, some epimediums are deciduous. The foliage disappears fairly soon after we have a hard frost, but other species are evergreen. But like so many evergreen herbaceous plants, the foliage really only lives for 1 year. And the plant doesn't care if you don't cut away this old foliage, but for a more attractive display, it's good to cut its old foliage away sometime in the late winter before it starts putting up new growth. And that way, when it's blooming, you're not looking at the foliage, which is ratty by the time it's in bloom again. The foliage on this one is very stiff.
Yeah.
And quite a sawtooth edge to the leaf, not one that is, going to do any harm, but they're very stiff.
The plants in general are really resilient because this thing, I don't know if you can see what's growing, they're growing between. The soil here is, there's not a lot actually where those are planted. They're growing between the enormous roots of this Tarocaria over here. So, and you can see Doug's foot there and the size of that root. So they have some competition and I'll take it.
Oh, I didn't know we had a second part of the Carolina Parrot.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk about snowdrops and hellebores.
The snowdrops right in this area here are Elvesii. So I think we may have talked about this one last time as well. But this is, I think, the giant snowdrop is a common name for it.
Yeah.
And this is one of the earlier flowering species for us. We have forms of it that start flowering in November, but these are some of the later forms that we have, and they're actually quite large. I believe these bulbs probably came from Brent and Becky's, but I could be wrong. These may have come from another time as well. But these are some good sized ones, flower wise. Elvesii.
And the specific epithet, Elvesii, I heard that Mrs. Elwes would say that people often pronounce it Elwesii, and she says, well, it's our family name and we don't wheeze. It's Elwes. Mr. Elwes was in the Crimean War and brought it back to England in, I guess, the early part of the 20th century.
On the other side here, there's another little species, which is just starting. We don't have as many of these, and I don't know if I can even say this. Warnoia. I can't spit it out. Can you spit that out, Doug?
Well, you got it, Warnoia.
Warnoia, yeah. But it's, to me, the leaves on this, it's a lot smaller species. The leaves on this are they're a bright green, but the Elvesii and Nivalis, they tend to be this glaucous green to me. So I like this little one. We don't have as many of them growing, but we're starting. Got a few little clumps here. And yet another one that's just starting over here is just the straight Nivalis, the more common snowdrops. And these are just getting going here. We've gotten a little colony starting on this little bank here.
When Galanthus nivalis is happy. They multiply real quickly, and you can dig up these thick clumps and spread them around.
These are starting to grow. I think they've been in the ground like 3 or 4 years, oh, 5 years. So they're starting. Yep, there's one more down here, and I think this is a nivalis as well, isn't it? This magnet, or is it a hybrid?
It does say nivalis.
This is a really vigorous Galanthus nivalis type called magnet.
Yeah, it's a clone. When there are hundreds and hundreds of selections of snowdrops available, what I value most is one that makes a good show in the garden, because you can spend a lot of money for one with a very fancy flower, but then the plant might peter out after a few years. But some of these good vigorous clones like Magnet or S. Arnott and some of the others just get better year after year, and they really make a lovely show this time of year. There's a limited selection available from bulb vendors. If you got serious about snowdrops, you should search out some of the mail order nurseries that specialize in snowdrops and similar treasures.
John
Lonsdale,
yeah.
Edgewood Gardens.
He has a really good selection.
Yeah. Why don't we step back and
Sure.
There's some interesting hellebores here. Well, let's talk about this tree.
Sure.
Acer, this is a maple. This is
It's a Bergerianum.
Bergerianum.
Yeah.
I forget them again. That's named after somebody with that family name of Berger. This is an Asian species of maple. Starting to realize that I used to think of Acer bergeriana as a small maple. It's a lot bigger than the Japanese maple, Acer palmatum. And this is not our biggest specimen. This is another one that we walked past. That really is more about the size of our native red maple, Acer rubra. This cultivar Naruto is an odd one where the leaf is sort of rolled up, so it makes the key.
It looks drought stricken. It's kind of strange. It's not ugly, but I can't find any good ones here.
Well, there's
remnants of a leaf.
yeah.
And they're curled like that normally.
Yeah, the flaky bark is handsome.
It is pretty.
The fluted trunk is handsome. It's a real, sturdy tree that puts up with less than ideal growing conditions. There are quite a few cultivars available. We have a new one that has bright yellow foliage in the spring. I don't remember the cultivar name.
Oh, I'd know it to hear it, but not to say it. But yeah.
It's not Ogon, is it?
No, it's not.
No. Okay.
I took pictures of it this spring, and I think they were posted at some point when no one was here.
We do have that big stand of Lenten roses over there. We could peek at it if you don't want to.
Sure. I have 15% of my battery left. That's the only thing. That's our rate determining. Our determining factor here.
Anybody who has grown Lenten rose, what we used to call Narcissus orientalis.
You mean Helleborus?
Narcissus. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, these are not Narcissus. These are hellebores. Sorry. This is my second presentation today, so I'm impressed that I'm able to even tell you what my name is. But these are hellebores, and anybody who has grown the Lenten roses, what we used to call Helleborus orientalis, but now know to call Helleborus hybridus, know that they sort of become the zucchinis of the flower garden, where you're abandoning pots of seedlings on your neighbor's door because you don't need them. So there's a lot of breeding going on nowadays between species that weren't supposed to hybridize. And they are usually sterile. I don't see a single seedling in the neighborhood of this hellebore. And I think for the gardener who doesn't have an endless amount of time to weed out seedlings, these sterile hybrids are a big asset. And this is Hellebores Eric Smithii. There's 3 different hybrids, and they all have Hellebores lividus as one of their parents, which is a tender species, but has beautiful pale veining through the leaf. And I don't see that so much in this. Well, here's a young leaf that shows a little bit of that pale veining, but other hybrids have it much more pronounced than that. But now, if you are growing the Lenten rose, you can go in and cut off all the fruit stalks after they're done blooming, and then you won't have the seedlings. But that's just one more task in the garden. This is Hellebores Balliardiae. The three hybrids, one of them involves Hellebores niger and lividus. The other one is Hellebores corsicus, or is that the other
is it
name? Argutifolius with lividus, and then there's a hybrid between lividus and Argutifolius, and that hybrid's named Sternii. And when you cross Sternii with niger, that's the third of those 3 crosses. That's probably more information than you care to have. But you end up with, handsome foliage and sterile plants, but a real pretty floral displays. Okay. Different aspect. You look at this plant and you think it does look a lot like a Lenten rose. Well, this would be one of the, similar to some of the wild parents of the Lenten rose. This is an Italian species, Hellebores ligoricus. Small, almost yellowy flowers. Yeah, it's fragrant, which is unusual for a hellebore. Nice fragrance. I had this species in my own garden, and when it was warm enough, I'd smell the fragrance on the air. And there are a number of sort of greeny yellow flowered wild hellebores that are very similar one to the other, so they're often hard to tell apart unless you know where they originated. But charming in a smaller, more sort of wildflowery way. How are we doing for time, Chris?
Did you hear, Doug? How much time do we have, Chris?
I had to find my mute button. We're doing good time-wise. We may not be doing good battery-wise. So do we need to do questions before your battery poops out?
Yeah, that might be a good thing. So how about we start taking some questions now, if there are any, and we can we'll wander over here to the big patch of hellebores on the way, and we can take questions over here.
That sounds like a good plan. Anyone have any questions? You're going to unmute your microphone, or you can ask it in the chat, and I'll relay it to Tim and Doug.
I was interested in finding out more about that native red maple that he was discussing.
Native, we didn't talk about a native red maple that I know of. We may have mentioned red maple when we were talking about Bergerianum. The red maple would be Acer rubrum.
Yeah, I mentioned it in relationship to the size of that Acer Bergerianum. Acer rubrum, despite its name, is not a red foliaged plant. It has red flowers in the spring. Often the fall color is red, but through the summer it's green leaf. So I know when it comes to Japanese maple, people often call the red foliaged ones red maples, but no, they're just red foliaged forms of Japanese maple. Acer rubrum is one of our most common native trees. It is also one of the most frequently planted trees. People often say overplanted. I'm probably only alive today because of Acer rubrum. I grew up near New York City, and February is the darkest, grayest, dreariest, longest month of the year, and the only sign that spring might eventually get here were the swelling buds on Acer rubrum. But I know the person with the question has to know this plant. They just don't know it by name, because any commercial landscape is going to have Acer rubrum in it.
Yeah, where I'm from, they cover the hillsides. I'm from Western Pennsylvania. We don't have a lot of sugar maple where I'm from, but we have red maple everywhere.
So Tim,
Any other questions?
there's a question in the chat that I know what you're going to tell Lily. Lily would like to know how to promote growth on 2-year boxwood cuttings.
How to promote it?
Why aren't they growing?
They're just slow.
What I was thinking your answer was going to be to take bigger cuttings.
Yeah, you can take a big cutting on a boxwood.
That's what Joey's telling me to do.
They are slow growing. I mean, they're a plant you have to be patient for, patient to grow. They aren't fast.
Why aren't they growing? Are they in a container? Or
Are they in the ground or in the container?
If they're in the ground and they're being super slow, I'd have your soil tested. If they're in a container, fertilize them.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that she's already started them, just keeping them underneath ideal growing conditions as best as possible would encourage growth.
Yeah, they're not fast.
Yep, they certainly aren't fast. So Doug and Tim, let's see where we can get this, where we can get it. There was a question. What was the name of the pyramidal boxwood that needs little pruning?
We had, let's see, we had Pyramidalis. We had
The first one was Northland.
Northland and also Durunk. But yes, Northland was the first one that we showed. And it's a lot younger plant. And the other two have been in those same spots for decades. So that's why they're a lot taller and there. And any of those three would be great if you can find them.
Okay, and
we had Northland for sale on the plant cart this fall, but I think 2 people bought a plant and that might have been it. So we often have really wonderful plants on the plant cart, but they don't necessarily go home with anybody.
Okay, someone's asking, they have a 40-year-old boxwood. Do you think it was like 4x6 or something, Chris? Something like that. And could it be transplanted?
Yes.
Yes, they can be transplanted.
Yes.
It's just how strong of a back you have is about the only thing limiting you. They are really relatively easy to transplant.
I agree with Tim. I would just caution that one of the most important things to do when you transplant boxwood is to make sure it does not end up lower than it was growing, because they will not tolerate being planted lower than they were growing previously. You could plant it a little bit higher and be on the safe side.
And they don't like wet feet, so
no,
that's one thing. They'll take the dry shade, but they won't take wet feet. Any other questions?
well, did Doug see a shadow or not? How many more weeks of spring do we have?
He's looking at his shadow right
I
now.
can
So
see my shadow.
There's a shadow. I don't know what that means. Hope it means there's spring coming around the corner. Well, it's not looking like more questions in the chat. That was certainly a great tour. You both got wonderful kudos in there, in the chat, that is. So thank you so much for a great tour, and thank you everyone for coming out today and enjoying a wonderful online tour of the J.C. Ralston Arboretum.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Be healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks.